Alright, so where we left off last time, I went over kind of basic human anatomy and how to kind of turn a stick figure into a human, but one of the problems with that, like the end result of that video, is that they're very static, kind of flat poses. So today we're going to be going over a few tips that I use to try to give some life into the figures that I draw, and basic beginner tips on how to start making poses that just breathe a little life into it. Realistic, kind of simple poses to just flesh things out a bit better. So our first tip is going to be to create a line of action. So this is going to be roughly where the spine kind of curves, and you always want to make it just a little bit curved. Like, never make a straight one, make it curved to the right or the left. It doesn't have to be too drastic, just a slight curve. To give it a bit of a stance, how it would really be standing. The second point is make it have a contrapposto stance. Now this means that the character is like shifting its weight from a different, its center of balance is not even on both legs. It's having more weight on one leg, so another leg is coming up that makes the hips kind of come at an angle a little bit. The hips are going to be diagonal lines, and then in order to counteract that, you want to make the shoulder line that we draw here, you want to make it kind of balance that out so that its center of gravity makes sense. And our last tip is going to be about form. Now this is a very basic kind of exercise in perspective. You don't really need to understand perspective to start practicing this in your drawings. So we're gonna redraw our circles and lines and triangles that we did in the last one, where we simplify the human form down into shapes. And now the difference between a shape and a form is that a form exists in 3D space. So instead of a circle, it's a sphere. And we're gonna want to show that through our rib cage and our waist by just drawing lines called cross sections that go around the center of it, almost like we have X-ray vision, so we can see it going down the back too. But it just adds depth and makes them exist in space. So then we can think about how this character is basically composed in real space. And you can also think about something very subtle to think about is that foreshortening exists. So when something is further away from the camera, it's going to be slightly smaller. Don't go too overboard with this to begin with, but just if the one arm, so like the arm on figure 1 is away from the camera, so you're going to want to make that arm just slightly smaller, just very subtle differences. You don't need to go overboard until you start doing more dynamic poses, but this is for a more basic pose. So we're just going to go through here and draw all of our kind of basic geometry, our basic forms over these characters to give them their stance and their pose. Now, going on to a new layer, we're gonna put our basic anatomy over these figures to actually give them some real muscles and skin, how they should really look if they're a bunch of, I guess, naked figures existing in real life. One thing that I will admit, I'll fess up to, is that my draftsmanship is pretty poor in this video. I make a bunch of scratchy lines. By the end of, I get the basic forms across. It serves its point for teaching, but one thing that I do need to work on is my draftsmanship and better line quality and more confidence in my line work. And yeah, to finish up this little drawing, just take away these three things. Kind of use them as rules or guidelines when you're creating basic poses before you start going into more dynamic things with perspective and foreshortening and everything. Just one, make your line of action. Make it something. Don't make it a straight line, just something. It could be the slightest curve, but add a curve to give it some life, some dynamicism. Second point is make the stance contrapposto. So this comes in when you're drawing your lines for your waist, your character's waist and your character's shoulder. Make them kind of come in angle towards each other to balance out, make sure the center of balance of the character makes sense. And then number 3 is form. Just make sure that your character exists in 3D space, and start off by drawing the simple geometry in ways that convey that it's a 3D object and not just a flat object on a paper. And I hope you learned something from this. But yeah, that's it. Peace.